Hi friends, welcome to episode 44. A bit later today, this cold is still hanging around. Talking about something hanging around, but this grim weather out there, it's not very nice. It's quite sort of dull and damp and overcast. But anyway, in the barn, it's sort of dry, although a bit cold. But anyway, plan of action this weekend is to continue with that wing area at the front of the bus that I was doing last week. You might remember I put some green paint on around the front of the vehicle. Very light coat of paint will show up anything that needs to be done, any further action. So there's a little bit more filling that I need to do on that front wing. And then I'll put another coat of paint back on it and we'll see how that looks. The interior of the bus, I need to work on that, fitting that isolator and the boost socket, as well as strengthening the bulkhead to take that equipment. And with any luck, I might have another look at those ceiling panels. I had a bit of an issue last week. As you might recall, I found the ply was starting to lift up on it. And I don't really want to go on with putting loads of paint on and doing all this hard work and then for it to become a problem in the future, because we might as well stop now while we haven't gone too far with it and restart on that part of it. The other thing is the beading. The original beading, which joins the panels, was pretty cream cracker, to put it mildly. My brother has found a joiner somewhere in Norfolk who's going to make a little jig, and then he's going to plane the wood to the original specifications. So that's really good. So a little bit of movement on there. So if we abandon the panels that I've done so far, and then we get new ply and we've got the whole wood, we're probably looking at doing that around January, maybe February. All depends how long it takes for the paint to go on and for it to dry over successive weekends. So yeah, so here we are, episode 44. Grim, horrible day out there, and my cold is still persisting. So anyway, let's see how we get on. Sit back and enjoy, and yeah, let's make a start.
Right, Saturday turned out to be another social day, but on Sunday I was left on my own, so I managed to get on with quite a bit of this. But yeah, that cold is still hanging around, even today when I've done it, which is a couple of days after I filmed that. Yeah, I'm still a bit croaky, so sorry you have to pardon me. Anyway, I'll do an update about this roof, this ceiling, which has posed a little bit of a problem. So let's kick off with that first. Here you go, this is what an RT looks like with no ceiling in it. So that's the interior of 3461. I took the ceiling out years ago, and surprisingly I can't find the panels. They were quite big in them days, but anyway, they've got any bigger or smaller, but yeah, they're certainly not in the barn anymore, so I don't know where they've gone. Anyway, the edge panels are metal. I've got all of them, and they can go back in once they've been sprayed up, so they're fine. But anyway, so the problem is these panels that run in the middle of the bus. So what we did was we went out and acquired some of this. This is the a very thin marine ply. Now, I painted this back in September. Apparently it requires something like 4 weeks to cure. And I noticed straight away as I was doing this, this panel looks lovely, doesn't it? And I noticed straight away I was doing it that some of the wood on it has started to delaminate. And that was starting to give me a bit of a concern. So allowed them to, allowed them to sit for about 4 weeks at the back of the shed. And yeah, if you saw me trying to pick out the bits that had started to come away from the wood. So anyway, so I allowed it to sit, rubbed it down with the flatbed sander last weekend, and put some undercoat on it. And it's still clearly delaminating. So I had a chat with my brother, who is a carpenter, and he suggested that we scrap this and go on and get some new, much thicker ceiling panels. This stuff's quite thin. It's only 3mm, and the original one was 5.5. Now, I mean, people go, oh, it's only 2 mil, it's only 2.5 mil. But that's probably about 40% of the density of the panel. And what my brother's worried about is if we go ahead and use this wood, there's a possibility it might start to flex in the middle. Well, actually, there are some wood screws that run down the two edges of it. My brother was a bit concerned that it's going to be too thin, and then if you look at it as it sits in the bus, it could well bow. So what we're going to do now, we've pretty much made our mind up. We're going to scrap these, and we're going to go out and buy brand new ply and start from scratch, which means we're going to put this paint on it, and then it's going to allow it 4 weeks to go off, and then we got that fun with the colour. It's going to be cream. You may notice, if you saw that picture earlier on, I'll put it back up on here, that the bulkhead I'd already sprayed long ago in cream. And it was some cream paint. I can't remember where I got it from now. Actually, I found the tin in the barn, but it's not enough to do this total lot. So we're going to have to get some more made, probably based on the sample that Roy Gould brought up a few weeks ago. So anyway, there we are. So that's a bit of an update on these panels. A lot of time wasted, but it is a bit like that. There's no point now going ahead and using these and then spending sort of ages and ages trying to get them right, when the best thing now is just to pull the plug on it. I will use these panels, by the way. There's little Rexine panels that are inside the bus that run down the side of the seats, and there's some at the front bulkhead. And if this is okay, I might actually cut this to size and cover these with Rexine, so the interior panels, these will become the interior panels basically. So the problem is now this has put us back probably about 8, maybe 10 weeks. So we're probably not going to be doing this until sort of January, February at least. Anyway, here I am just removing a sample of the old RTL ceiling so my brother can match up the ply. That's it, drop it on the floor is a good idea. So yeah, there we are. So let's move on then. This is probably the least exciting of all the work. It does give you an opportunity for your mind to drift off and think about other things. But anyway, here I am in the barn now, sanding down the wing of the RT. This area here had some strange sort of undulations in the metal. I think it's possibly where it's been bashed and it's been straightened out, and they've done their best with it. But it was quite difficult to lose them entirely. I think I'll probably lose them underneath the beading that holds the mudguard in place, but it still needs to be done. It was very obvious. So what I did was, last weekend I threw a very light coat of green over it. You can see that there, and that then shows up all the little bits that need to be further done. There was some also stuff on the edge pillar which I needed to have a look at as well. So yeah, opportunity to get dusty, unfortunately. Lots of dust being created. Talk about chucking paint on things. Do you recognise this? This is the inside of the bonnet at the front of the bus. And it was so dirty that I originally thought it was Lincoln green, but it turns out no, it's actually MBC green. I've actually sprayed the inside. And it is what I suppose was like a replacement bonnet that they must have put on in 1977, because I couldn't find any evidence of any of the original colour. Right, so here it is now in MBC green. One quick coat of paint over the top of that, and it's not come up too bad. I did notice a few bits, typical me. They were not my runs. I saw some runs after I sprayed it and thought, oh hell, what have I done? No, it wasn't. They were old runs actually. They were there in the original paint. So it does happen, I suppose, when someone's just trying to bash it on rather quick. You'll end up with some runs in curves and things. But so I ended up having to flat it back down again. I had intended to do that, but I hadn't really intended to go wholesale with it. But yeah, I suppose you could argue, who really sees the inside of a bonnet? But no, you do. There you are, the inside of the bonnet. I've now got the flip side to do. That's still in grey primer. But I wanted to get this on inside because when I start putting how can I say, you can't really flip it over. Once it's wet, if it sits badly, it will damage the paint. So that needs to be dry, and then I'll spray the other side. So there we are. That's the bonnet of the RT. Right, before we get the bus started up, we've got to deal with the wiring on the bus because it is in an appalling state. Some of these wires in here actually bare. What they are is cloth covered wiring. There's not PVC like we have these days, but this is cloth. and the wire inside goes like a coat hanger. It just will not move, won't budge. You could take this out of the bus and it will just stand upright on its own. So there's no flexibility left in it whatsoever. And obviously with the vibration over the years, I suppose they fracture. And two of the wires in there are completely bare with no covering on them whatsoever. Now, normally, with the rest of the bus, you'll have a couple of fuses in the circuit that will just keep popping away, which will direct you to a problem. But here, you've got two cables which come up directly from the batteries, and they are not fused. Now, you know, that might have been okay in the 1950s and, you know, probably for most of the life of the vehicle. But you've got no way of isolating it. So in the event of a short circuit occurring, the only way of dealing with it will be to get into the battery compartment and isolate the batteries. So, yeah, not a brilliant idea. And that's one of the reasons why I'm fitting or refitting an isolator to the bus. I'd fitted an isolator, must have been 1988 or something like that. I can't remember quite what the year was, but I'm guessing. So I fitted an isolator because I was worried about this very problem. And I had an issue with the starter motor, which had decided to jam in on one occasion, and the only way of disconnecting the starter motor was to run round the back with some spanners and quickly disconnect the batteries. Unfortunately, the batteries had got so hot they were actually starting to gas. So yeah, it wasn't a pleasant experience. So as a result of that, I learnt my lesson and I fitted an isolator. So what we need to do now is sweep all this away. You can see the isolator that I fitted ages ago. To the left of that is the original block that the cables from the batteries came up to. And then the main cable went off from there, off towards the front of the bus. There was also a tapping. You can see those two PVC wires there, which were later modifications by me, to connect into the old cloth-coloured wire that went through the bus. So yeah, the modification from the new isolator. So that I've had to remove the isolator and those two bits of beading, which those of you familiar with Routmasters might actually notice them as being beading off of Routmaster. There were a couple of spare bits I had lounging around somewhere years back. So I cut them down, and what they do is they just provide a bit of extra rigidity to that bulkhead, because that is quite thin alley. It really can't take significant amount of weight. So I did that just to spread out a little bit more. But I've had to do a little bit more work on this now, and we've had to clear all this stuff away. And this is what it looks like, having been cleared away and primed. So as you can see, visibly, I've marked up the bulkhead, ready for fitting the new plate on the inside, so we'll be able to see that. So that what you can see at the bottom of shot there is the wheel arch. Now you will notice the wheel arch tapers downwards towards the centre aisle of the bus, but there's also a seat frame there just underneath that light. I've masked it up with tape, and that's the frame for the bench seat, and the bench seat sinks back. So the area just above on the immediate right hand side of shot is just about enough to put the cowbells in, the new socket. So that'll go in there. And then to the left of that, near that little pipe you see, that's the pipe for the cables that go to the saloon light switch box. And yeah, so that needs to be done. Just below that, you'll notice a small crescent. That's the opening that goes into the battery compartment. So two new cables will come from there, and two new cables will then run across the top of that wheel arch into the new isolator, and then there'll be an extra tapping which will come off and end up on the socket for the boost pack. So that's basically what I'm doing there. Right, so what we see here, my new bracing piece has been fitted. On the back of the panel, which you can't see, I've fitted two more bracing strips, basically, just to hold that. They are wood screws. Now, I've got to be a little bit careful here, because the obvious way of doing it will be to put nuts and bolts there. However, unfortunately, if you need to move things around in later sort of stages or whatever and refit things, nuts and bolts are not very good, because I need to take the other panel off, and that requires, as you may have seen me doing last week, quite a lot of disassembling. So what I'm doing is I'm using wood screws into wood battening behind, and I'm using metal inserts as well. I've got an insert tool. So for the two main components on there, that's the socket and the isolator, they will go through this wood, and then on the other side there'll be two little or several rather inserts, so that will hold that into the panel, so if I do need to remove them later on, I haven't got to disassemble half the bus. Right, so something I must do is to make sure I get this lined up properly. As I say, there's very limited space, so what I've done is I've fitted the plug onto the end of the socket, and that plug is just at the absolute edge. You can see what I mean, look. So just at the absolute edge, so I can make sure I've got enough space to pull the plug off the socket without it fouling on the wheel arch, because that's the only space you've got. So this is going to have to be a bit high. Yeah, so I'm going to make use of the additional space just underneath that seat, and then the isolator, as I said earlier on, will go to the left of that. So right, so that's that little job sorted. Right, so here we go. Something I removed earlier, well, Saturday actually. On the left-hand side, you've got a piece of conduit that carries the wiring from the light switch to the main circuit. And in the middle there, you've got the box, which is the fuses and the switches for the saloon lighting. Now there's 5 fuses in there, which you can just about see. The one on the left hand side supplies a little socket for a bayonet cap lamp. So I imagine like an inspection lamp or something like that, just in the conductor's lockers area. It's just hidden up in the corner. You won't notice it unless someone points it out to you. So anyway, that's the first fuse, and the second and third fuses, I think, lower saloon, left and right, and then the other 2 are upper saloon, left and right, so hence the 5 fuses. But as you can see in this picture, the wiring's pretty dire, so I've got to replace all of that. That'll be a simple job actually. I'll look forward to that in comparison to doing the cab area. This is actually quite a nice little job, but just at the top of that piece of conduit where that little junction box is, it had got a bit of an attack of the metal moth, so I've had to take that into work and ask one of my colleagues to weld it up, so so it's sort of back complete. It will go in, it's perfectly solid as it stands at the moment, but I'd rather weld it up while I got the thing off the bus. Right, so that's the saloon light switches when they've been removed from the box that they sat in. And you can see the 5 fuses and the 2 switches for the upper deck and lower deck lights. On the far right hand side, you've got another 2 wires. That's the main negatives that come back not only from the interior lights, but also from the back lights as well. So they go into that point and then they go out to the batteries. So right, earlier on we saw the gubbings from that box. This is the box. Now curiously, they used 2 colours. The conduit was black, so where it had been painted at the front, so obviously they've done refurbishments over the years, and they painted this brown. That's the chocolate brown that you see on the bottom of that flap there. But the top part, the box and most of the conduit was black. So I'm going to do that all in black, and I'll do the back wall in the brown colour. Now that top piece, that's not actually brown, or it is brown, but it's a sort of a fibre composite material which is designed to stop a short circuit. Obviously they didn't think about the wires themselves deteriorating to such a state, but there we go. That was something that was done to prevent a short circuit back to the body of the vehicle. Right, and this is that piece of conduit. After I moved it from the bus, you can see the little bit up the top there that I haven't painted because we're going to have to weld that. And you've got that little flap that you saw earlier on, and the box have all been resprayed. Now they're sitting on top of the near side wheel arch because I sprayed all of them at the same time. I'm not too happy about that wheel arch because it's got a bit of crud. Well, actually not crud, it's where the it started to rust away and it's took bits of the metal out. So am I going to be vain and fill it? Oh, let's see. Anyway, so we'll find out next weekend. So thank you very much for watching. This is the end of episode 44. So YouTube will very kindly offer you some more interesting videos. So anyway, I look forward to doing the next one, seriously. And thank you very much for watching.